Hello, I'm Andrea Foss. I'm the coordinator of the Pioneers Park Nature Center, and I'm thrilled to share with you that in 2023, the Pioneers Park Nature Center is turning 60 years old. It's a wonderful and special place, and I'd love to share more about it with you. And to do that, our naturalist, Neil Bryan, is going to share with you some wonderful images and stories of how the Nature Center became the wonderful place that it is today.
Thanks, Andrea. In the last year since I've been at the Nature Center, I've often been struck by the beauty and the wonder that is there, and was interested in learning more about the people that made it the place that it is. So I'm going to tell you a little story about Pioneers Park Nature Center. To do that, we're going to start more than 60 years ago, because it has its roots in Pioneers Park itself, which began in the 1920s, 1930s. The picture that's up on your screen now is about 1962, probably near where the columns are in the park. We're going a little bit further back, 1942. Those trees you see are about 12 years old, planted by the WPA and CCC in the 1930s. And this photo is from 1935. You can see preparations being made for the installation of the smoke signal statue there in the park. And those trees there are, again, about 5 years old. We need to go back a little bit, 7 years previous to this, 1928. And 1928 was a time of vision and opportunity in Lincoln, and specifically with Pioneers Park. The vision was provided by Ernst Herminghaus. He was a Harvard-trained landscape architect who was born in Lincoln, went to University of Nebraska, went to Harvard to get a degree in landscape architecture, and came back to Lincoln and Omaha and other places throughout the country during his career. Ernst provided the landscape architecture plan for Pioneers Park, and you can see that from this drawing in the 1930s that many of the features that we know and love in Pioneers Park were part of that original plan. The opportunity to develop this plan was provided by John Harris, who in 1930 was a New York City financier. But he grew up in the 1870s and 1880s in Lincoln and had fond memories of the place. His parents actually were pioneers, settlers of the region. John happened to run into an old friend of his, childhood friend, George Woods, who had recently formed Woods Brothers Realty, and wanted to find some land that he could donate to Lincoln. George found some space a little ways out of town, along the railroad tracks, part of the Burlington feed yards, and John was able to purchase eventually 600 acres and donate it to the city of Lincoln for what is now Pioneers Park. You can see the golf course and the golf course in the top left, and what would become the Nature Center in the bottom left. And overlay Herminghaus's actual drawings from the time, and you can see how closely the builders enacted Herminghaus's plans. You can see that there's a bird sanctuary noted there. But it would be 30 years until that part of the park became an actual bird sanctuary. In the 1960s, speeding forward 30 years, you can see in the bottom left, Pioneers Park is on the map. In 1963, there were about 150,000 people in Lincoln. None of them were living within 3 or 4 miles of the park. It's more or less a regional park. There are not neighborhoods near the park. You can see that Belmont neighborhood north of Cornhusker Highway is just getting started. Development to the east barely reaches past Holmes Lake at this point in the bottom right-hand quadrant of the city. But in 1962, there was newfound interest in Pioneers Park and developing that bird sanctuary that had been noted on the original plan. Joe Seacrest, the owner of the Lincoln Journal, had visited in the spring of 1962, had visited Cornell University and their famous bird sanctuary. And when he returned to Lincoln, he knew that Lincoln would need to have something like Cornell did. So he wrote Jim Ager, the current superintendent of parks, and the son of Chet Ager, told him to order a redwood shack and a fence, and they would be able to start a nature center in Pioneers Park. The map here is from 1965. You can see that there is a single building on the north shore of that middle wetland. At the time, they didn't have names for it. That was just Pond 2. But they built that shack, ordered mail order, came on a truck, and built in a few days in December of 1962. That next spring, they had a dedication ceremony. You can see the mayor, Dean Peterson, on the left, looking on as Chet Ager's widow, Beth, receives a plaque from current city councilman and former mayor, Dee Tyrell. And the fellow looking on from the right is Jim Ager, current superintendent of parks and the son of Chet Ager. The following spring, May of '64, the first naturalist was appointed to administer and to describe and to plan out more of the activities of the Nature Center, which was now part of Pioneers Park. The emphases in this decade were really on habitat. From the very beginning, Anne Lang, the new naturalist, took careful scientific notes about what she saw in those early years. She worked closely with the Parks Department and the University of Nebraska faculty members to come up with wildlife habitat plans, land management, planting schedules, and they developed that corner of Pioneers Park very quickly into a nature center. At first, the nature center was only open on Saturday and Sunday mornings. Anne Lang, the naturalist, would meet families at the gate and take them on a hike into the nature center. There were also other activities. School children began to visit the place. In 1970s, we had Dr. Esther Bennett became the next naturalist. Her emphasis was education and creating a sense of place for the new nature center. When Esther Bennett became naturalist in 1966, there were about 4,000, 5,000 visitors per year, but exhibit space was built up. You can see in the background on the top right photo, you can see Dr. Bennett leading a field trip of school children, and you can see in the background of that photo a second building has been built, expanding the cabin complex. By the end of 1968, there were about 40,000 visitors who had come to the visitor center and entered into programs with Dr. Bennett. In the 1980s and 1990s, we experienced some growth. In the late 70s, Dr. Bennett advocated adding some land across the creek. In a letter she wrote to the City Council, she said that the general scientific consensus is that 40 acres, which is what the current size of the nature center was the absolute minimum for a nature center. And she advocated adding city-owned land on the other side of the creek to the nature center. In 1975, that happened, and that original swinging bridge was built to connect the two units. Also in 1983, ever since the 1930s, there had been animal pens housing primarily exotic animals, was then part of the Pioneers Park Zoo. In 1983, the City of Lincoln decided to consolidate their multiple zoos into one, and therefore decommissioned the Pioneers Park Zoo and added that previous land to the Nature Center. That land is currently part of the bison pasture around that paved loop in the map there. In 1985, the city also planned to build a multi-million-dollar education complex in the Nature Center. It wasn't until 1990 that the education wing was built. That picture's the bottom left, or the center there. And not until 2007 was the final phase completed. In the 2000s, the big emphases were expansion, connection, and intensification. You can see this yellow area was the original 40 acres dedicated in 1963. In 1975, this small parcel across the creek was added. In 1983, the Powell family donated some more land to the south. In 1985, the zoo was decommissioned, and this area to the north part of that road, was added to the Nature Center. In 1997, the Martin family donated Martin Prairie to the north of where the Nature Center buildings. In 1999, the Hilltop Prairie to the west was donated also donated and purchased from the Martin family. And finally, in 2005, another 230 acres was purchased and donated, what we now call Foundation Prairie. So in the 2000s, in the late 90s and early 2000s, the Nature Center, and in fact Pioneers Park itself, nearly doubled in size with this new land acquisition. The reason that this was so important was primarily for habitat reasons. Now that we had 668 acres in the Nature Center, you can see that waterways would now be connected across, that we could manage the northern parts of the Nature Center, and that would impact what happened in the southern parts. We weren't dealing with such small patches of landscape, that we were able to make meaningful connections and manage a much larger portion of land for wildlife habitat. Nevertheless, those connections that we were making in Pioneers Park with this small green area as Pioneers Park and the Nature Center still makes up a very small portion of the watershed of Haines Branch Creek that flows through the Nature Center on its way to Salt Creek. Pioneers Park is about 2 square miles, and the watershed itself is about 69 square miles. Even though we do have much more land, most of the activity from the visitors is still concentrated in that very small area, about 40 acres, which is about the size of the original dedicated Nature Center. It's been much more developed. There are more visitor services there, but a lot of people don't realize how much land goes beyond the buildings themselves of the Nature Center. So to recap a little bit, in 1930, this was the original 600 acres that John Harris donated to the city. In 1963, 40 acres down here was set aside as part of Pioneers Park that would become the Nature Center. And in 2005, this is how much land had been added to the park and to the Nature Center itself. The Nature Center constitutes about 50% of the total land of Pioneers Park now. You can see that on the eastern half of the park, it's very multiple use. There are a lot of trails for bikes and dog walking, and there's a golf course. There's playgrounds, picnic areas, not to mention horseback riding. On the western half of the park is the Nature Center, and that's set aside for land management and wildlife habitat for visitors to come and walk around and to enjoy those restored and wild places. It's for this reason that bikes and dogs are not allowed in the western half of the park. It's because the Nature Center is managed for a different use. In 2010 and beyond, the names of the games have been maintenance, refinement, and multiple use management. In 2009 and 2010, two historic buildings were added to the Nature Center. The Hudson Cabin, which was originally built in 1863, and the Cunningham Schoolhouse, which was used as one-room schoolhouse north of Valparaiso. Both of those buildings came to the Nature Center from Heritage Village on the grounds of the State Fair Park. The Nature Center, you can see, has a wide use of landscapes. This is restored prairie north of the Nature Center buildings, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of intervention to keep a prairie looking like it is. It requires a disturbance from animals and fire, may require additional seeds, and all of that work is done to maintain and restore prairie habitats to the western half of the park. The Lynn Johnson Nature Education Building was added to the Nature Center in 2020, and it's all the headquarters for outdoor education efforts in the park. Those programs include school field trips, summer camps, and other scout and youth programs throughout the year. As I mentioned, multiple use management is a big part of what we're doing too, because we are managing for habitats of wild animals, but we're also managing for an enjoyable visitor experience where people can come and learn with their colleagues and families about the land and people that lived on the land. There are a variety of gardens that are primarily on the south side of the Nature Center. There's a focus on native and natural uses of plants. And that brings us to today, 60 years later in 2023. These words that I've been using in a presentation today still apply to our activities at the Nature Center. We still have a vision of what we want the Nature Center to become. We have opportunities to make that reality. We are striving to make connections with the habitats and the programs that we offer. We seek to make it a destination for visitors and for wildlife in their natural habitat. We're also refining our approaches in our land management and our outdoor education practices as well. And I'm going to invite Andrea to come back and talk about how you fit in to all of the activities and things that we're doing there.
Thank you, Neil. I've enjoyed so much learning more about the Nature Center, and it's a wonderful place that really we are here for all of you. And so we want you to be involved and to help us in current times and going forward. We need you to be involved. So how do you do that? Well, you can visit. That's an easy thing to do. Come out with your friends, your family, whoever. Just come out on your own to explore the trails, to visit the habitats through various times of the year. You can also attend Nature Center programming. We have a number of different programs we do throughout the year. Neil mentioned that we have school programs and camps that certainly take up a lot of our time, preschool programs as well, but there are other public opportunities, night hikes and festivals that we have that you are welcome to be a part of. You may also donate. So you can donate your time. We love our volunteers. They are a huge part of what makes the Nature Center work so well. People who help with our gardens, that help with land management projects, prescribed burns, volunteers who help with programming. Maybe employment is a better fit. If your skills and time work out, we love wonderful employees that serve in a number of different ways. You can also donate your treasure. You can support the nonprofit organizations that are supporting the Pioneers Park Nature Center, such as the Lincoln Parks Foundation, the Friends of the Pioneers Park Nature Center, and the Prairie Corridor. They are huge proponents of us, and we are very thankful for them. You can also advocate. So the way you do that is you tell others about the Pioneers Park Nature Center. Why is this place so wonderful and so special? You can also do things at your own home. Plant native plants. Encourage your neighborhood association or your homeowners associations to start utilizing native plants in their landscaping. They're often drought tolerant, they're pollinator friendly, and they create habitats that support wildlife. The Pioneers Park Nature Center, we're all about supporting wildlife, and that extends beyond the boundaries of the Nature Center. So thank you for listening today. We hope to see you out on the trails. Have a wonderful year and enjoy celebrating the Pioneers Park Nature Center with us. Thank you.